Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
America's export of soybeans helps the U.S. maintain a positive agricultural trade balance. Nebraska contributes half of its soybeans for export. The protein and oil content in soybeans enhance the growing demand for higher protein diets. The Nebraska Soybean Board promotes research to develop new soybean varieties with higher protein and oil content for major agricultural markets. The Nebraska Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up.
Market Journal, television for making agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension, where you can know how, know now. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. The Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up.
Welcome to this week's edition of Market Journal. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. On this episode, we look at the USDA's expectations for 2013 planting acres with John Meuret. Gary Zoubek shows how you can maximize center pivot efficiency. Rick Rasby discusses Estrus Synchronization. Dave Aiken explains a proposed bill in the Nebraska legislature regarding animal welfare. And Jerry Valesky gives options to farmers and ranchers looking to plant forages in irrigated ground. John Meuret from Meuret Grain Company is our marketing analyst this week. On Thursday, the USDA released its quarterly stocks report as well as its estimate of 2013 planting acres. Corn and soybean markets were fairly tame in the days leading up to the reports. We talked with John after the numbers were released Thursday afternoon.
You look at the planting acres, John, really it was right along what the trade was guessing. The corn stocks are probably what got the major story, but everything was just skydiving without a parachute today. Are there any major surprises that you saw?
You know, I think the stocks, Jeff, everybody's going to say, and you just hit on it, the stocks are obviously the surprise. And there's people that were bearish, but, you know, 5.1 or a 5.1.5 was going to be a bearish number. And here we come at 5.3. That's extremely bearish. I think that took the entire trade by surprise. Even the people that thought they could weather the storm were no longer able to weather the storm. So it was a big sell-off there.
Planning intentions were right along with what the trade was thinking. Corn's around 97.3 and soybeans around 77.1, which is basically right where it was last year. Any surprise to you that, or at least in this report, there's no more numbers to be found?
You know, yeah, the overall acres are a surprise, and I think the people that look at the corn and the beans then would say, okay, if they're not in the corn, they should be in the beans, and they're not to be found. Yeah. I think that's a mistake, and I think over time here we're going to find out that there's more acres. I don't know whether the government was trying to put in a little lower acreage because we're a little wetter in parts of the Midwest, but to me those numbers are going to need to be adjusted upward going forward. You know, the overall in Nebraska, Jeff, and I think that's where you're going, overall acres in Nebraska down, you know, that makes no sense to me. You drive anywhere from here to Lincoln to West and you're going to see more pasture tore up and going to be farmed. So I'm not sure why the Nebraska number is lower. You know, we need to dig in a little deeper and find out why.
7% lower, John. That's the highest across the country. I don't know if you knew that.
I did. Thank you, Jeff.
Drop. Yeah, you bet.
I made that up. I actually didn't know that.
All right, the corn stocks, where's it coming from? Is it just that the feed has been rationed, that the exports weren't there? Where does that come from?
I think there's a little bit of both, Jeff. I mean, yes, we've done some rationing. I think everybody would agree. We've found ways to cut back and become more efficient. And yes, there is imports. You know, you look at Canada. You know, somebody this morning told me that New York State has got corn at option price. And, you know, corn where we're standing today is worth 40 over. So clearly the market's working. We're seeing the infiltration from Canada, from South America, from Mexico with some milo. We're seeing a lot of interesting things go on that are taking the place of corn. So it makes sense. And I think people underestimated the ability of the market to work here. So while I'm shocked, you know, this isn't impossible.
That export market that had been pretty dry, does this light a fire under it at all?
I don't think so, Jeff. You know, today we're still $1.50 to $2 higher than the South American market. You know, we will not, unless they stop selling and we really start selling here, they're not going to come in and be a participant. So
where do you find good news for beans at? And really, overall, until June when we get the next planting and stocks report, but beans overall, South America keeps rolling along. The only thing we keep hearing is the export problems there. Where do you find good news for beans at?
Well, I think, you know, and on the same note with the corn, Jeff, beans and corn, both at face value, are very friendly numbers. And the problem is that since we trade these numbers, we always have estimates before the report comes out. So make no mistake, and on corn today, we're still very tight. We're 700 million bushel tighter than a year ago. Beans, the same thing. We're very, very tight. We have almost no carryout. And while we've slowed down the exports, we need to make sure that they still don't come back into the U.S. And so for the next 3 months, I think the excitement comes in the fact that we're going to watch spring planting weather. We're also going to watch any export activity that goes on out of the U.S.
Tight stocks are still in the game.
Tight stocks are still in the game. March exports were half of what they were a year ago. That's a big deal on beans. We have slowed down the export window. And then we'll see if they start to come into this country. If the South American beans work their way into the U.S., that's an issue.
Corn was limit lower, at least the nearby contract was limit lower today. What do you expect to see for corn and beans when the market opens again on Monday? It has a 3-day break here, or Sunday night.
Well, I think Jeff, we're going to look at the weather Sunday afternoon, and if we see a continued warm-up pattern in the 10 to 15 day, we're going to see more pressure on that corn. If we come in on the flip side of that and we see, a cooler, wetter forecast, maybe we get, this thing off the mat a little bit. But it would not shock me to see corn down 25 or 30 Sunday night. Beans follow suit down 10 or 15. But once corn finds a floor, I think then we can all focus back on where we go from here. So
tell me where you stand here if you're looking at old crop corn and you were waiting after that report or before the report and thinking maybe you would get some help and you didn't get any help. Where might the next help come from?
I think weather's a big item, and you also have, like we hit on earlier, you have extremely tight stocks, and so the road to new crop is not going to be a smooth one. We're going to see these ups and downs. This just happens to be a down. So
same goes for beans.
Same goes for beans, Jeff. And I think if you can be patient here, and you're going to have to be, your cash corn should still be in the 7s. If we go to 650, you're still going to be at 7. If we go to 6, you'll probably still be at 7. So you're okay. There's a little hope for you. But I would be an aggressive seller of new crop if you can get back towards $6. So.
And then beans, what do you think there?
Beans are tricky, but we're going to trade 13 at some point. These numbers today, I would say on beans, are more friendly than corn, so that might lead us back higher. What
position would you be comfortable at if you were trying to price out the new crop if you hadn't done any at all?
I think if you haven't done anything and you can get back to 12.75 on beans and 5.5 on corn, I'm a seller. I'm a seller on both of those. So.
For so long now, we've thought that maybe wheat could help out with corn when it comes to substituting something in there for feed. What do we see playing off of today's reports?
Well, we're still doing some of that. Even though we've settled back down here on corn, you still see basis values very high. And so I think you're still going to see the wheat substitute, maybe not in Nebraska directly, but certainly in the West Texas market, you're going to see some of the wheat move from the east. The railroad is very aggressive today. They want to move anything into the west they can to get some revenue. And so, yeah, wheat's going to move into places it normally shouldn't move into. So.
Give me an update on basis numbers where you are.
Bases here locally have backed off probably 15 cents from the highs leading up into this report, and today I think they'll firm back up half of that. And so, we're going to trade between 30 and 50 over in northern Nebraska.
Corn?
Corn.
And beans?
And beans are going to trade probably in the same type of levels, 40 to 50 over here on soybeans. So.
Next week, we'll talk with Mike Briggs for his thoughts on the cattle markets. If you follow the cooking world, you may be interested in visiting our website to see our video of Simon Majumdar, who was on campus earlier this week. Simon is a chef, writer, and former judge on the Food Channel's Next Iron Chef. His upcoming book titled Fed White and Blue is taking him across the country on different food journeys. And why Nebraska? Because Simon says Nebraska beef is some of the best he's ever had. Along with Stan Garbitz from the Nebraska Department of Ag, or Stan the Man as Simon refers to him, Simon was breaking down a cow carcass with the UNL team on Monday afternoon. You can hear why he believes Nebraska farmers and ranchers deserve credit for a high quality of beef in a web-only video now at marketjournal.unl.edu. With planting season approaching across the Midwest, we thought it'd be a good time to look at how farmers can make sure their pivots are running as efficiently as possible. Gary Zoubek joined us in a field on campus Thursday to share some tips.
Well, it's not the heat of having to irrigate, so it's a good time. And last year I had an opportunity to fly the area and we saw a lot of rings out there because Mother Nature didn't help. And so now would be a good time to talk to your manufacturer, get a chart and make sure you've got the right sprinklers at the right locations.
You mentioned you flew in the plane. What are some of the big gaps that you saw? I mean, how prevalent was it?
Well, we actually saw quite a few examples where a nozzle or a sprinkler wasn't working or it wasn't overlapping like it should, and plug nozzles. We saw several of those. If it's an inner span, it's probably not a real big deal because it's not a lot of acres. But if something's wrong on the outer span, it can be a real problem. We also saw systems where when the end gun went on, it was getting plenty of water out there, but the remainder of the pivot wasn't putting on what it needed to. So last year was a great year to see what happens. You might check your yield monitors, see what your maps look like, and you might see some of those problems in your fields.
All right, how different are sprinkler heads if you're going to replace them? If you find out one's not working or you want a different kind, are they all equal? Does price matter?
Well, I think price matters. You want to make sure you get adequate overlap. That's one of the key things to getting good uniform application, and so don't skimp when putting new packages on. But the key thing is, another important point is to have a pressure gauge at the far end of your pivot to make sure that you have adequate pressure across the whole system. If you're on hilly terrain, it's important to use pressure regulators so that you're getting more uniform application, because if you don't have the regulators on there and if they're not working properly, the application may not be as uniform as you'd like.
And if you check those pressure gauges at the very end, you probably want to do it when it's flatland or at least the same area of the field each time around.
Well, you can do it at several locations where it's flat, and then also if it's at the top of the hill or at the bottom of the hill, because it will vary. And so we've kind of got a checklist of things that you should do, but I check it at a couple different locations.
What about the motor? Anything to other than just flushing the oil and making sure it starts?
Now would be a good time to
do that?
Tune it up, get things ready so that you're ready, and then once it's planted or early in the season, if you make that first pass, check to see if you're getting any runoff on areas, because if you're getting runoff, that means you're not having it go at the proper speed, and so that's an important factor too, because if you're getting runoff, you're not getting uniform application.
So we look at all this, and probably especially sprinklers. Do you have a number of how much yield could be hit by if you don't ensure that you're running as efficiently as possible?
No, but I think this year when we could see yield differences of 20 to 30 bushels in areas where maybe they were getting adequate moisture versus areas where they weren't getting the uniform pattern that they were looking for.
And finally, Gary, as we close out, all the things we've been talking about play into system capacity. So before you even start the irrigation season, how can you determine what your system capacity is?
What you do is you take the gallons per minute that your well is pumping under normal conditions, divided by the acres that you're irrigating, and that'll come up with your gallons per minute per acre. And we have a NEB guide that talks about the minimum capacities. For eastern Nebraska, it's about 5.65 gallons per minute. Western Nebraska, it's about 6.6. But if you have good Hastings soils or soils like that, those capacities can be considerably less than that. And so with that, it'll help you decide when you need to start irrigating. In many cases, if you've got at least 5 gallons per minute per acre, you'll have enough to keep up in most situations, even like last year.
You can find more information on pivot maintenance in a recent Crop Watch article we've linked to on the Market Journal website. According to the latest USDA state report, calving across Nebraska is 49% complete, with 76% of cattle and calves rated good to excellent. Rick Rasby talked with us earlier this week about estrus synchronization, which is managing the beef estrus cycle so cows can be bred around the same time. We started by asking what's the most important thing to remember when calving wraps up.
Planning. You got to be planned on this deal and planned well in advance. And so, just like you indicated, we're just now in the midst of calving. Some are getting done with calving, but yet now we're thinking about that next calf crop. And so when you think about that, you think about estrus synchronization, you think about being able to use AI in that situation. But planning is going to be key.
You said before we started, this is not a substitute for good management.
That's
What do you mean by that?
That's exactly right. You know, you got to, for estrus synchronization protocols to work, you got to have managed those cows properly from a nutrition standpoint. You need to have those cows in good condition. You need to have some activity on the ovary. So depending on what estrus synchronization protocol you use, it has something to work with in that perspective. But it's not a substitute for poor management. Cows need to be in good condition. You need to have activity on the ovary.
Why is AI-ing more of an advantage maybe in this situation?
Well, you basically, from an estrus synchronization standpoint, is that you basically take control of the estrus cycle. And so from that vantage point, then AI works into that system very nicely.
What are the things that maybe haven't worked in the past that haven't been able to keep that cow bred?
Well, you know, you think about it, you think about how important body condition is in regards to reproduction. And so, you know, if you don't have cows in good condition, if you don't have activity on the ovary, then you're not going to have a very successful estrus synchronization program or protocol, and that's just going to lead to low pregnancies and low opportunities to get cows pregnant with AI.
Difference between cows and heifers, if you're talking about this?
Yeah, you know, you think about heifers. There are going to be certain estrus synchronization protocols that you're going to work with them. And then we think about cows, there's probably some that are approved and will work a lot better with the cow side of things. One thing from the cow side of things, you know, you need to be so many days postpartum before cows are really ready to rebreed. And so as you think about estrus synchronization, you think about postpartum interval, those cows probably got to be somewhere between 50 to 55 days postpartum before they'll really respond very well to estrus synchronization protocols.
You and the rest of the beef team have some tools online at the beef website. What do those tools allow producers to do?
Well, if you go to our beef website, beef.unl.edu, on the right-hand side there's a beef cattle reproduction. If you click on that, it'll take you to the Applied Reproductive Strategies website. On that website, you just click on resources, and there's in that resource page there's an estrus synchronization planner. And you can download that estrus synchronization planner. It's an Excel spreadsheet. It has all the estrus synchronization protocols for both cows and heifers. And you click on the protocol, it'll print you out a calendar. So really a nice resource for those producers thinking about using synchronization.
What am I paying for that, Rick?
Nothing.
Oh, wow.
That's the nice thing about it, is that they've worked out, that task force has worked with Iowa State, and they have it up there for free.
And again, the website for obtaining the planning worksheet can be found through beef.unl.edu. Legislative Bill 204 would require anyone in Nebraska who witnesses animal abuse to report the behavior to law enforcement officials within 24 hours. State Senator Tyson Larson of District 40 first introduced the bill in mid-January, and Nebraska isn't the only state to introduce this kind of legislation. Tennessee has a similar bill working through its House. UNL Extension Ag Law Specialist Dave Aiken spoke with us earlier this week to discuss the bill and the impetus behind those like LB 204.
In the past, we've had representatives from animal activist groups who have, posed as employees at livestock production facilities or slaughter facilities that have taken these undercover videos, that we've all heard so much about it and seen. And these in some cases have resulted in prosecution and facilities being closed. And so it's a pretty serious issue and a very controversial issue.
Right, and that's on one side. That's going to, if you read the article, that's going to be the quote-unquote activists that are the one side, and the other side is the people actually owning the farm, the animal people. What's their response been?
Well, they have come back with some legislative responses. The first one being making it illegal to basically shoot these undercover videos. And they did that in Iowa, I think it was last year or the year before. Right. And that has some free speech problems, constitutional problems in terms of being, it probably wouldn't stand up in court.
Okay.
So they have tried to, have requirements that, if you're applying for a job to work at an animal facility, that, if you make any misrepresentations in terms of, I'm not a spy from PETA, or I'm not here to take undercover videos or something like that. If you lie about those things, then you can be liable for, damages, money if the it hurts the business, and that those lies being illegal as well.
When Iowa passed that a year ago, they said it was first in the nation. It was going to be a groundbreaking bill. But LB 204, what does that address? Does that have a component of that in the bill?
It doesn't have the making the videos illegal per se, but it does have the employment application provisions, and it also has a requirement that says that if anyone uncovers animal abuse or has evidence of animal abuse, it has to be turned over to law enforcement within 24 hours.
Give me the arguments for both sides of this bill, from the activist side and then for the farm owners, for the animal owners, and really anyone in, this is anyone, so zoos, pet shelters, anything that has to deal with animals would be included in this bill. Give me the pros and cons.
Well, the livestock owners or the slaughter facility owners would say, you know, if abuse is occurring, then that needs to be turned over to law enforcement immediately so we can get it stopped. And, you know, that sounds like a really good argument. Right. On the other hand, the animal activists saying, well, you know, if we're going to get a legal prosecution out of this, you know, we need to have more than just one episode. You know, we need to have more, you know, several episodes by different people, so they can't say, you know, well, it's just this one employee that's bad, but our operation is good and stuff like that.
Dave says because LB 204 isn't a priority bill, he believes it's unlikely it will be acted upon this session. Continuing drought and its adverse effect on Nebraska forage production don't bode well for the state's cow-calf producers. In the March Nebraska Farmer, you'll learn that dry lotting cows and calves is one option to consider this spring. Confining cows and calves in a dry lot situation may well be an alternative to having to sell off the herd. You can read more about the pros and cons of the practice in the March Nebraska Farmer. In related news, UNL Extension range and forage specialist Jerry Valesky says farmers and ranchers with irrigated ground have the option to plant forages in that soil to help offset less than expected growth on other land. This has become a popular topic around the state, and Jerry explained a few avenues producers could take if they're interested in this route.
Well, here in the spring, the primary cool season annual type of forage that we're probably talking about would be things like oats, which is probably the most common or popular one, but spring triticale, barley, even some spring wheats could be planted here in late March to early April. And with those cool season annuals, they would probably be ready for grazing in mid to the third week of May. And that cool season annual would last probably through June. And then following that graze out of that cool season annual, a lot of these people would come back in right away with a warm season annual, like a Sudan grass, a sorghum Sudan grass hybrid, pearl millet, any of those, and then grow those for grazing or forage or hay production later on in the summer.
Jerry says rain-fed ground will be trickier when it comes to planting forages. He suggests farmers and ranchers in those situations watch precipitation over the next few weeks to see if a cool season annual would even have enough moisture to grow. Spring is pushing a gradual warm-up across the state. Soil temperatures range from the low 30s to upper 30s with warmer readings in the Panhandle and southeast corner. Now with his weekly weather forecast, here's UNL Extension State Climatologist Al Dutcher.
Well, folks, here we are again for the weekly forecast. Of course, it's the holiday weekend. There's a lot of traveling going on, and unfortunately, we do have a little bit of precipitation in the Central Plains region. But before we get to the main forecast, let's take a look at this last week. Of course, the big news was the snowstorm that hit northern Kansas and brushed portions of southern Nebraska, particularly southwestern Nebraska and portions of south central Nebraska. But as we moved up to the I-80 corridor, precipitation totals dropped off rather dramatically. In most locations, we're fortunate to get an inch to a couple inches of snowfall. And then the heavy snowfall, of course, laid down across northern Kansas, and then that exploded as it moved across Missouri and into the eastern Corn Belt, where snowfall totals in excess of 12 inches were very common. In some portions of central Illinois, we're up to 18 inches of snow. So as that melts, it's going to definitely delay the start to planting season. And of course, with the cool temperatures that have been locked into place for the better part of the last 2 weeks, that certainly is keeping soil temperatures from getting back up to where we would need to get them to plant. In fact, it's probably going to take a couple weeks to get there. At least in our region now, we did see some precipitation move through the last 24 hours, and the expectation as we go forward in time is that we will probably see a little bit more inclement weather today, and then we'll probably see another reinforcing shot of cold air move down the pipeline on Monday, which will probably give us a chance for some scattered snow showers and light rainfall. So let's take a look at the upper air models and see what we can see in terms of the projections going forward. And I'll draw your attention to the northwesterly flow that we're expecting today. And there is a little bit of weak energy that's going to push through the state, and that shouldn't start moving in here as we get into tomorrow. But for today, we're going to have basically clouds holding on in the east with some scattered light precipitation, maybe a clap of thunder, but nothing in the way of significant moisture. I think we'll be lucky if we get about 1/4 of an inch across the eastern half of the state. In the western part of the state, we should see some clearing sky conditions and actually nice warm temperatures for the day. Now, as we go to tomorrow, we're going to see this cold air is going to start to sweep its way through, and it should come through the state primarily during the overnight hours, where we will have a chance for scattered rain and some snow. Right now, I think the ground temperatures are too warm for us to see any significant accumulations, but it wouldn't surprise me as we get into northeastern Nebraska and portions of east central Nebraska, where we may see some light dusting of accumulations on the grass surfaces. As we go into Monday, we'll see that cold air basically shifts to the east of us, and it's going to be a raw day for across a good portion of the state. The clouds should start to break out of the region by the time we get to the midday, but we'll see temperatures that will be pretty much locked into the 30s. Now, as we get into Tuesday, that cold air starts sweeping to the east, and we'll start to see a gradual warming trend as the ridge from the west starts to build in. Looking at partly cloudy conditions and temperatures rebounding up into the 40s. As we get into the day on Wednesday, of course, that ridge starts to build into our region. Looks to be a very nice day. In fact, the next few days will be nice. As we go into Thursday also, we'll see that ridge is firmly in place here, and we'll be looking at temperatures rebounding back up into the 50s. And if we get into southwestern Nebraska, we may even approach the upper 60s. Now, as we get into Friday, we'll start to see another wave coming in, and there is indication that we could see a little light precipitation breakout with a little bit more on Saturday, and then we're looking at the 10th, 9th, and 10th for a more significant piece of energy to come out into the region and give us a substantial widespread precipitation across the northern and potentially the central plains. So if we look at the temperature forecast, what we are looking for is temperatures in the west in the 60s this weekend, and we'll start to see a cooling trend in the northeast as we get into Sunday night, and then the major precipitation may be Sunday night into Monday, where we will have a chance for some scattered rain and snow, and then pretty much benign conditions all the way through Thursday, with temperatures starting to rebound back up into the 60s, and then possibly some light precipitation as we get into Friday. Now, as we get Friday through the following Tuesday, we start to see another cold air pocket move into our region, and in terms of precipitation, we do see some precipitation moving into the northern plains.
Thanks, Al. Our interviews from this show with John Meuret, Gary Zoubek, Rick Rasby, Dave Aiken, and Jerry Valesky are all archived on the Market Journal website as part of the March 29th episode. Next week, Mike Briggs will be our marketing analyst. Greg Kruger will update us on the condition of Nebraska's winter wheat crop, and Daryl Martin will discuss the use of preseason irrigation. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. We'll see you next week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. The Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension, where you can know how, know now. Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
A diesel-powered engine on a farm works hard and operates in a grueling environment. Soy biodiesel fuels stand up to the challenge of powering farm equipment, but are also renewable and environmentally responsible as well. The Nebraska Soybean Board is committed to encouraging the use of soy biodiesel to protect the environment and sustain Nebraska's agriculture. The Nebraska Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up.